Good morning. Catherine, you did say too much. You said everything I'm going to say. First, drugs is not a political issue, let's be realistic. Perhaps it's moving in that direction, but none of the politicians at the doors are going to be asked about their drug policy. Drugs, however, should be a political issue, obviously. Drugs affects everyone in this country, indirectly or directly. Doesn't just affect the drug user, it affects their families, of course, and often the people who suffer most from drug misuse are the families of drug users. It affects the taxpayer. 80% of all monetary crime is estimated to be drug related. Either robbing to pay for your drug habit or robbing to pay off a drug debt. And in prison, a sizable majority of prisoners are there because of their addiction. And there are hundreds of thousands of victims of crime as a result of drug use, who are traumatized and who experience terrible events in their lives because of drug use. So it is a problem for all of us, and therefore it should be of much greater concern to the political issue. As we all here would agree, drug policy has failed. We went from having a heroin problem in the 80s in the inner city of Dublin to now every single city, town and even village in Ireland has a multi-drug problem. I was talking to somebody a while ago and they said they came from a little village. I can't remember what the name of the village was. I said, oh gosh, you're lucky, you don't have any drugs there. And they said, you must be joking. So it's spread throughout the whole country, and just as worryingly, the range of drugs has spread and continues to spread. The crystal meth now, which has devastated the whole United States, is available in Ireland, and in a few years' time will be readily available anywhere in Ireland. And we saw the young lad in Cork who died from 2CP or 2CB. And I mean, the range of drugs is just so enormous. That drug had never been seen in Ireland before. So what should we do? We cannot, and we have to acknowledge this, we can do very little to control the supply of drugs. 90% of all the drugs being imported into a country are estimated to come through undetected. Drugs can come into this country extraordinarily easily. And as long as you can buy a kilo of cocaine in South America for €700 and sell that on the streets of Dublin for €70,000, there will always be people who are prepared to take the minimal risk of being caught bringing drugs into the country. Every drug, we use the criminal justice system. That's our primary response at the moment to the drug problem. But for every drug dealer you actually arrest and lock up, there are 5 more waiting to take their place. And usually they are younger and more vicious than the people that we actually locked up. So we cannot really do much about the supply of drugs, but we can do a lot about the demand for drugs. The demand for drugs, I want to talk about particularly treatment options. In 2005, the midterm review of the first National Drug Strategy, one of the recommendations was that nobody should wait more than 4 weeks after assessment to begin a treatment program. And here we are 10 years later, and that is just fantasy. There are some parts of the country where you don't have to wait 4 weeks for treatment because there is no treatment and there is no assessment. But the waiting list for treatment can vary enormously from a few months up to 12 months or perhaps even longer in certain areas. Some people need residential treatment, and most of the people I work with need residential treatment. You cannot come off drugs if you're living at home with siblings or parents who are also using drugs. You cannot come off drugs if you're living in a community where all your friends that you meet every day are using drugs. You can't come off drugs if you're living around the corner from your drug dealer and you owe him money. A lot of the people I work with need residential treatment, and it is in very short supply. I think there are less than 40 detox beds in this whole country. Getting into a residential detox, to go into St Michael's Ward or Cúandara in Cherry Orchard, there is a 9-month waiting list. Every single person I have ever worked with on drugs wants to come off drugs. They come to a point in their life where they want to come off drugs. Maybe they've got themselves into it with a girlfriend, or maybe they've had a child, or maybe there's the possibility of going to prison. There's some trigger there and they want it. But once they want to come off drugs, you have a 6 to 8 week window of opportunity. And if you cannot put them on the path to coming off drugs within those 6 to 8 weeks, then you may have lost them. They become demoralized, they give up. One of the problems, apart from having a dire shortage of detox beds, when you have gone through a detox program, you have to go into a residential program. You have to go into a treatment program. Our experience in our detox centre is people who come down to detox and simply come back to Dublin or back to their own life, it doesn't work. They've got to go into a treatment centre, but when they have finished the detox, there may be no treatment centre place available. And so you have the option, do they go back home and wait for the place to become available, in which case they may relapse into drugs, or does the detox centre hold on to them for another few weeks until a place might become available and block up that place for others. And of course the big failure in the services that we have is aftercare. There is virtually no aftercare. We have an aftercare, drug-free aftercare service. Coolmine have, Camino have, but certainly we fund that through fundraising. We get absolutely no state funding for that, and I'm pretty sure Coolmine and Camino do exactly the same. There is no commitment to aftercare. I often say, well, you know, what's the point of a homeless person becoming drug-free? They go in, they go through an intensive drug treatment program, they come out the other end, they're still homeless. Where will they be given accommodation? In a dormitory full of drug users. And they've wasted their time. The failure to provide safe drug-free accommodation for people who have come off drugs is a huge part of the relapse problem. And of course the other issue when you come off drugs is having something to do during the daytime. When you're on drugs, your day is full. You get up, you have to get your money to buy your drugs, you have to find your drug dealer, then you take the drugs, and when it wears off, you have to start all over again. When you come off drugs, there is absolutely nothing to do. The day is empty. So one of the reasons that people relapse, they tell me, is I had nothing to do all day long. I was bored to tears. And so providing training or employment opportunities for people who come off drugs is absolutely vital, and yet there is so very little of it available to people who come off drugs. The decriminalisation of drugs, of course it's the right direction, should have been done long ago. There's absolutely no arguments, I think, against it, no rational arguments. In Portugal, as you all know, they have decriminalised it, but they've done something that we may not do. They have decriminalised the possession of small amounts of drugs, but they have invested heavily in treatment services. And my fear is we will decriminalise drugs here and not invest in treatment services. Decriminalising drugs would release a lot of money. 2014, last year we have figures for 11,877 people were prosecuted in the district court for the possession of drugs for their own use. And because they were prosecuted in the district court, it meant that there were tiny amounts of drugs. I was in court with a young lad, and he was charged with the possession of cannabis to the value of €2. Now, the case was adjourned several times. That meant the guard had to appear in court, wait around all morning for the case to be called. He was given free legal aid because it wasn't his first time being caught with cannabis, nor will it be his last. No drug user I've ever known has been deterred by the threat of prosecution. He was given free legal aid. The judge asked for a probation report, so he had to go and see a probation officer. All at state expense, huge waste of money. Of those 11,877, 382 were sent to prison. Again, at enormous cost. to the state. Others were given community service, others were given fines, and again the cost of collecting those fines. Just the cost of criminalising the possession of small amounts of drugs is enormous. And if that money is reinvested in treatment services, I think we'll have far, far, far more effective approach to drugs and far more effective results from our efforts to reduce drugs. Finally, as I say, there is no commitment at a political level really to the drugs issue. In the 5 years of this government, we have had 4 ministers with responsibility for drugs. That doesn't give any minister time to read into their brief, to develop policies, and then to pursue those policies. And indeed, in the recent reshuffle about a year ago, they forgot to appoint a minister with responsibility for drugs. And when it was pointed out to them, they got into a huddle and they said, okay, we'll give it to the Minister for Health. As if he hadn't got enough problems on his plate. And then he suddenly decided he didn't want it, and he handed it over to Aidan O'Riordan, who is doing a fantastic job, but doesn't have the time to carry through on the commitments that he would like to see implemented. Thank you very much.